From Olympian to fugitive, a former Canadian snowboard champ is now one of the FBI's 10 most wanted.
Wedding went from being an elite athlete to running one of the most sophisticated drug traffickers.
Ryan James Wedding isn't just on the FBI's most wanted list. He's sitting at the very top. Once a world-class athlete, he's now running a billion-dollar drug empire, owns a $5 million South Florida mansion with hundreds of millions in crypto and over $100,000 stuffed in a dresser like pocket change. U.S. Department of State was so stunned by his lifestyle that they slapped a $10 million bounty on his head, double what they've offered for any fugitive on the FBI list. So, how did he go from chasing gold to moving 5 tons of fentanyl a month? And what is he really doing with all that blood money? Let's dig in. In 2002, Ryan Wedding proudly represented Canada at the Winter Olympics. By 2025, he represents everything the FBI fears most. Wedding went from this to that in a little over a decade. But the real shock? It's not just what he became. It's how he lived while doing it. It's important to note that much of what we know about Wedding's life comes from sealed indictments, intelligence from joint agency task forces, and testimonies from former associates, many of whom were arrested as part of his syndicate. Not all of it is confirmed. But this is the picture we've been able to piece together. Wedding's connections ran deep, straight into the heart of the Sinaloa cartel, Mexico's most powerful and violent drug syndicate. These ties didn't just give him access, they gave him protection. From Dubai penthouses to Vancouver high-rises, Ryan moved like someone above the law. He didn't fly commercial. His meetings were too sensitive. Ex-Russian KGB operatives, Iranian encryption specialists, Hezbollah-linked traffickers, Russian mob bosses. This was his inner circle. He traveled by private jet, booked under fake names. His marriage to an Iranian-born businesswoman from British Columbia wasn't just personal, it was political. She introduced him to offshore bankers, luxury developers, and foreign investors. Their relationship blurred the line between legitimate business and international crime. But Wedding wasn't just a hidden kingpin. He mingled with the elite. One of his closest allies? Nahim Jorge Bonilla, a Miami music executive who called himself The One. Bonilla helped broker drug deals at a level most traffickers could only dream of. As the owner of Mandrake, a high-end Miami Beach hotspot, he gave Wedding access to the rich and the ruthless. Add in a powerful Indian trucking magnate, a top Toronto hitman, and known Russian mobsters, and you start to see the scale of Wedding's reach. But in the drug world, there are no happy endings. One snitch, one slip, one message that doesn't self-delete in time, and the whole kingdom cracks. Ryan Wedding's rise remains one of the most terrifying success stories in modern organized crime, but how these operations were executed is still shocking. And now let's go back to the beginning, to see how it all started. Before El Jefe built a drug empire, he was just a kid with a board and a dream. Born on September 14, 1981, in Thunder Bay, Ontario, Ryan James Wedding was raised on cold mornings and steeper hills. His grandparents ran a small ski hill called Mount Baldy. His dad, Rene, was an engineer and former ski racer. His mom came from a family of competitors. In other words, snow ran in the bloodline. By the age of 12, Wedding was snowboarding full-time. He stood out quickly, fearless, focused, and obsessed with improvement. He had no fear, said national champion Bobby Allison. Where others hesitated, Ryan attacked. Around 1991, his family moved to Coquitlam, British Columbia, a suburb of Vancouver and a better launch pad for his athletic future. There, he found steeper slopes, stiffer competition, and a new level of discipline. He won his first snowboard race at 12. By 15, he had joined the Canadian national team. His dad pumped in close to $40,000, customizing his gear, adjusting boots, grinding boards. Every inch was optimized, and the results came fast. bronze at the 1999 Junior Worlds, silver in 2001. The Olympics weren't a pipe dream. They were the plan. Salt Lake City, 2002. Wedding made it. Men's parallel giant slalom. The world watched, and he finished 24th out of 32. Not a crash, not a flameout, just forgettable. And that's when it started to unravel. The Olympic buzz faded. Sponsors cooled. Wedding enrolled at Simon Fraser University, but didn't last. He drifted. Off the podium, off the radar, off the map. Meanwhile, Vancouver was changing. It was no longer just a Pacific city. It was becoming the Silicon Valley of weed. Grow ops flourished. Profits skyrocketed. And like so many ex-athletes chasing relevance, Wedding found a new high. First, marijuana. Then harder moves. He didn't just sample the underworld, he stepped into it, board first. 2008, San Diego. Wedding flew in from Vancouver to close a deal. 24 kilos of cocaine. He checked into a hotel. Waited. The seller was an FBI informant. 3 days later, the former Olympian was in cuffs. In court, he looked tired, ashamed. "I guess I lost my way," he said. But he didn't stop. 2015. Project Harrington. Canadian authorities exposed a bizarre cocaine network involving uniformed personnel, a Coast Guard member, an Air Force employee, and even insiders with access to military zones. The syndicate was ruthless, unstable. Several people tied to it were later found murdered. Wedding, now operating out of Montreal, was linked directly to the operation. And then, nothing. He vanished, dropped off the radar, until authorities picked up whispers from Mexico. Wedding hadn't quit. He had evolved. He got involved with the Sinaloa cartel, one of the most violent drug organizations on Earth. That wasn't luck. That was placement. He embedded himself inside a supply chain that spanned from Colombia's jungles to Canada's suburbs. A former snowboarder is now fluent in black market economics. He stopped using his real name, built a portfolio of aliases: Jesse King, Giant, Public Enemy, El Jefe. Encrypted messaging became his playground: Threema, Signal, Telegram. He operated under usernames, never voices. Tokens instead of trust. A dollar bill with a serial number sent via photo to confirm identity at a handoff. That was how he ran logistics. No names, just bills and bullets. By then, Wedding wasn't just moving cocaine. He was moving fear. Investigators say he was connected to murder plots, failed assassinations, and retaliations. He wasn't a runner. He was the strategist. And he was just getting started. From Thunder Bay to cartel territory, from Olympic athlete to international fugitive, Ryan Wedding didn't fall from grace. He traded it in. This isn't a redemption story. It's a blueprint for how someone can go from a national hero to public enemy number one, and how every system, from sport to crime, rewards obsession. Before we get to how he clawed his way to the top of the FBI's most wanted list, we need to peel back the layers, see how the criminal machine really operated, and how Wedding morphed into something monstrous. What you're about to hear might just be the most disturbing part of the entire story. The drug syndicate run by former Olympian Ryan Wedding wasn't built in back alleys or barroom deals. It was built like a logistics company, just one where late deliveries could end in murder. Wedding operated like a CEO. He wasn't on the streets, but nothing moved without his word. Known to his crew as El Jefe. His partner, Andrew Clark, a Toronto native known by 17 aliases including The Dictator and El Niño Problemático, was the field commander. If Wedding was strategy, Clark was enforcement. Together they ran a binational drug empire so tightly coordinated, so deliberately layered, it operated like a cartel franchise with Canadian management and Sinaloan ties. The system's heartbeat was Los Angeles. Stash houses spread across the city served as staging points. Inside them, Crews packaged cocaine freshly routed in from Mexico, bulk shipments smuggled in via hidden compartments in freight trucks, air cargo, and sometimes even maritime routes. 3 men managed LA on the ground, logistics hands who operated quietly, moving between stash houses based on the orders sent by Wedding or Clark. These orders would go through encrypted chats, broken into pieces. No one had the full picture. Once a load was ready, it triggered the next chain. Canada. This is where Hardeep Diamond Rata and Gurpreet Farmer Singh came in. Based in Brampton, Ontario, they weren't just distributors. They were node controllers. They knew when to send runners, when to receive shipments, and how to rotate drivers so no one got too familiar. When a shipment was in motion, 2 names often showed up: Rakim Ibragimov, the Russian, and Gennady Bilanog. John. Trusted border hands, drivers, couriers. They operated between Canada and California like clockwork. But their job wasn't just transport, it was verification. The token system. You couldn't just show up and pick up a load. That was suicide. Instead, the syndicate used a primitive, but brutally effective, form of 2-factor authentication. Each transfer required a token, a specific banknote whose serial number had been sent ahead via text or encrypted chat. When the handoff happened, the recipient had to present the exact same bill in person. No matching token, no product. This wasn't paranoia. This was precision. In a world where digital communications can be spoofed or hacked, a crumpled, traceable bill has become the most reliable ID system in the underworld. And it worked. Until it didn't. Yes, we fact-checked the dollar bill token system. Took hours and a whiteboard to unpack it clearly. If that made your jaw drop, hitting the subscribe button helps us make more wild stories like this. Done that? Now back to the story. Interestingly, this wasn't just a shipping company with shady margins. It was violent. When a load disappeared or someone talked out of turn, there was no investigation. There was a name, a photo, and a contract. Clark kept the list. Wedding approved it. On November 20th, 2023, a husband and wife, Jagtar Sidhu and Harbhajan Sidhu, were gunned down in their home outside Toronto. Their daughter was shot 13 times and somehow survived. The killers thought they were retaliating over a stolen shipment. They had the wrong house. Innocent people died because someone misread an address. That wasn't the last hit. On April 1st, 2024, a man was executed in Niagara Falls, shot dead in what prosecutors later called a gangland-style murder tied to an underworld ripoff. Authorities say Malik Damian Cunningham, aka Mr. Perfect, carried it out, allegedly on Clark's orders. By then, the network's reputation was reinforced not just by profit, but by terror. Nobody misstepped twice. If a driver was late, if a handoff went sideways, if someone talked too loud, there was a fix. Clark didn't just order violence, he curated it. What the crew didn't know was that in early 2023, someone slipped inside. A confidential informant, working for the FBI, inserted himself right at the heart of the token system. He didn't just witness how the banknotes worked. He became part of the transaction chain, logging tokens, phone numbers, and names. Each token became a breadcrumb. Each chat decrypted became a thread. Each movement across the California-Canada route became traceable. The FBI didn't need to break down the front door. They walked in with the blueprint. By mid-2024, what looked like an uncrackable operation had been quietly mapped: stash houses, truck routes, code names, and timing. The RCMP and US agents coordinated with Mexican law enforcement. The walls started to close. But at this point in the story, they were still running the game. Wedding was still free. Clark was still ordering hits. The stash houses were still humming. The tokens were still passing hands. This wasn't just crime. This was business. From Olympic fame to underworld kingpin, Wedding ran the kind of empire where the only password was a dollar bill. and the cost of failure was your life. But no one was ready for what happened next. Wedding's operation didn't just catch the eye of one agency, it triggered a domino effect across borders. The FBI led the charge in the United States, naming Wedding a top-tier threat and adding him to the FBI's 10 most wanted fugitives. The DEA began mapping cocaine routes from Colombia through Mexico into stash houses in Los Angeles before shipments moved north to Canada. In Canada, the RCMP did more than assist. They helped lead. Working directly with U.S. agencies, they ran joint surveillance operations, wiretaps, and helped unravel the logistics web underpinning Wedding's enterprise. The LAPD handled boots-on-the-ground coordination, targeting suspected safe houses and distribution nodes across LA. Interpol coordinated the international legal web, issuing global warrants and laying the groundwork for extradition. The tipping point came when the U.S. Attorney's Office filed a sweeping indictment listing continuing criminal enterprise, conspiracy to commit murder, money laundering, and international drug trafficking, the kind of charges reserved for criminal empires. One of the most dramatic moments came in Aventura, a wealthy suburb just north of Miami Beach. Neighbors recognized the mansion. It had once belonged to DJ Khaled, but few knew it had allegedly become a jewel in the crown of a global narcotics empire. Then the FBI rolled up. Tactical agents arrived at dawn with armored vehicles, blocking off the palm-lined street. Inside the property, they reportedly found marble floors, imported Italian furnishings, and a garage packed with luxury cars. More importantly, they arrested Nahim Jorge Bonilla, described in leaked reports as a music executive and alleged money launderer tied to Wedding's operation. Agents seized hard drives, crypto wallets, and a ledger detailing over $9 million in transactions. While Bonilla's name hasn't appeared in F-50 indictments, sources close to the investigation say this raid marked a turning point, proof that the U.S. government wasn't just chasing names. They were dismantling an empire. Following the raid, authorities zeroed in on Wedding's financial arteries. Bank accounts tied to Canadian and U.S. shell companies were frozen. Real estate in Miami, Vancouver, and Baja California came under scrutiny. But the real innovation was digital. Wedding's syndicate relied heavily on cryptocurrency, particularly Tether, USDT, to move cash, hide transactions, and avoid regulators. Yet investigators weren't far behind. Blockchain forensic teams began tracing wallet activity across international exchanges, leading to the freezing of over $126 million in digital assets within weeks of Andrew Clark's arrest. Several global banks, responding to U.S. and Canadian cooperation requests, flagged suspicious transfers and severed ties with offshore accounts tied to Wedding's network. On March 6, 2025, the case went nuclear. Ryan Wedding was officially added to the FBI's 10 most wanted fugitives list, a designation reserved for America's most dangerous and elusive criminals. The listing came with a $10 million reward, offered through the State Department's Narcotics Rewards Program, one of the highest rewards ever offered for a fugitive tied to drug trafficking. From Los Angeles to Toronto, digital billboards flashed his face. Posters went up in Mexico, Colombia, and border cities across Central America. The message was unmistakable. The U.S. wasn't asking nicely. They are coming. What began as a snowboarding prodigy's dream ended in blood, betrayal, and billions. Once secured by encrypted apps, aliases, and loyal enforcers, Wedding's empire is unraveling. His right-hand man, Andrew Clark, is in custody. His financial streams are freezing. His network is bleeding out. And his name now lives alongside the worst fugitives in FBI history. Wedding is believed to be hiding in Mexico, protected by old cartel alliances. But the net is closing. And in the criminal underworld, when the money dries up and the fear fades, even kings get betrayed. The fall of El Jefe has begun. And that's a wrap. This video took days of digging through sealed court docs, financial records, and cartel leaks. If it saved you from doom-scrolling half-baked crime threads, consider hitting the subscribe button. What organized criminal group or individual should we cover next? Feel free to share your choice in the comments. See you in the next video.